In this video, I'm going to analyze the pronunciation of a subscriber named Sam. Here's the information he's provided about himself. Sam is a native English speaker and is 51 years old. When he was in high school, he took Spanish classes and really enjoyed them, but did not become conversational in Spanish at that time. After his freshman year of college, at the age of 19, he served as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He lived in Buenos Aires for 2 years, both in the federal capital and in the province. By the end of his service in Argentina, natives told him his pronunciation was really good, and he feels he didn't have much of a foreign accent. In the year after he returned to the United States, he took a couple upper division university Spanish courses. However, over the past 30 years, he's spoken Spanish only occasionally, maybe once or twice a year for a couple of minutes, and he feels he's lost much of what he once had. But he recently decided to recover his Spanish, watching Spanish language content on YouTube, reading out loud each day, and working hard to apply lessons from this YouTube channel. In this video, I'll give an analysis of Sam's pronunciation first, and then we'll listen to his recording. At the end of this video, I'll estimate a numerical score for Sam using the Spanish pronunciation evaluation scale. This analysis is going to be a little different from any of the others I've done so far, because Sam's pronunciation is a little different in a very interesting way. When analyzing someone's pronunciation, I normally look for repeating patterns. These patterns constitute that individual's personal phonology, the rules they unconsciously apply when pronouncing any particular sound. My goal when evaluating anyone is to point out how their patterns diverge from authentic Spanish phonology, so they can make adjustments. In Sam's case, there are several sounds that he pronounces one way sometimes and a different way other times, and I'm unable to find a pattern to explain it. I think this is due to two things. First is that it's been a long time since Sam spoke much Spanish, so whatever patterns he established decades ago have partly broken down. And the second is that he was likely unaware of Spanish phonetics and phonology when he learned the language originally. Like almost everyone, he undoubtedly developed his pronunciation by applying his own ear and his own intuitions. So although he undoubtedly spoke Spanish very well in the past, as he studies phonology now, he's building patterns that are at least partly new to him. My suspicion is that these two things have temporarily left him pronouncing several phonemes without fixed patterns. So unlike previous analyses, this one is going to be divided into 3 parts. First, I'll discuss sounds Sam consistently pronounces extremely well. Then I'll discuss sounds he consistently pronounces in a way that requires improvement. And then I'll discuss sounds he pronounces correctly some of the time and mispronounces some of the time in a fashion that doesn't seem to follow a pattern. Alright, let's talk about sounds Sam consistently pronounces well. Number 1. Trilled R. In this recording, Sam pronounces trilled R in a way that sounds excellent and seems effortless. He has one of the smoothest and nicest trilled R's I've heard from a native English speaker. Listen for how he pronounces the trill in words like ocurrió, rara, chirriante, respiración, cerrado, and susurró. Number 2. Double L and Y. Since Sam learned his Spanish in Buenos Aires, he pronounces double L and Y like a voiced, post-alveolar fricative, zh. This helps him completely avoid the common problem English speakers have of pronouncing double L and Y like a soft English Y. Listen for him to pronounce oyó, apoyado, brillo, destellar, and aquellas, like oyó, apoyado, brillo, destellar, and aquellas. Number 3. Velar fricative. Sam also pronounces the velar fricative much better than most native English speakers. In this recording, he usually pronounces it like a velar fricative, which is accurate for the Buenos Aires accent. But he occasionally pronounces it a little stronger, like a Castilian uvular fricative. In one spot, he pronounced it a little weaker, like a Caribbean or coastal glottal aspirate, but still within the range of accurate for natural Spanish dialects. Listen to how Sam pronounces the velar fricative in words like hojas, cojeando, ojos, hijo, and magia. Now let's discuss some sounds that could use improvement. Number 1. English style L. In English, L is pronounced in a way that sounds lower, darker, and more posterior, while Spanish L sounds higher, brighter, and more forward. In this recording, Sam pretty consistently pronounces L like English L. You can hear him pronounce el resto del mundo like el resto del mundo. El anciano like el anciano. En el cráneo like en el cráneo. Los dedos like los dedos. Sus espaldas, like sus espaldas, and algo maravilloso, like algo maravilloso. Number 2. English style PT and K. In English, the voiceless plosives are pronounced with an accompanying puff of air or aspiration, p, while in Spanish they're not. Additionally, English T is pronounced with the tongue on the alveolar ridge, while in Spanish it's pronounced with the tongue on the lower part of the back of the upper front teeth. T versus t. There are certainly some places in this recording where Sam pronounces these sounds less explosively, more like their Spanish version, but he pronounces them with an English-style explosion of air most of the time. So he pronounces te enseñaré like te enseñaré. Entonces metió like entonces metió. Papel blanco like papel blanco. Ni te lo imaginas like ni te lo imaginas. And acercó la cara like acercó la cara. Number 3. Hard B and G. In Spanish, the B, D, and G phonemes are usually pronounced as very soft approximants or fricatives, and are only pronounced as stops in limited phonetic contexts. I don't have time to go into detail about their exact pronunciation here, but I have several videos on B, D, and G that you can check out in my core phonology playlist. In a couple of places, Sam pronounced B and G as approximants, but he pretty consistently pronounces what should be approximant B and G as stops. In this recording, you can hear him pronounce cosa bastante, like cosa bastante, sabes, like sabes, algo, like algo, and igual, like igual. And now the third category, sounds Sam pronounced Spanishy sometimes and Englishy other times. Number 1. Spanish versus English D. In Spanish, the D phoneme is usually pronounced as an interdental fricative, exactly like English voiced th in words like weather and clothing. It's only pronounced as a stop in limited phonetic contexts, and even as a stop, Spanish D is different from English D, being pronounced with a tongue touching low on the back of the upper front teeth, rather than the gummy ridge above the front teeth. In this recording, Sam pronounces D as an interdental fricative about half the time. You can hear this in words like todas, sucedieron, and pudo, in which he pronounced interdental D perfectly. But the other half of the time, he pronounces it as a stop, and I believe that when he pronounces it as a stop, he positions his tongue up near the alveolar ridge rather than down near the incisal edges of the teeth. So he pronounces hacia adelante like hacia adelante, cualidad like cualidad, and miles de cosas like miles de cosas. Number 2. Tapped R. In Spanish, tapped R is articulated almost exactly the same way as English tap D or tap T. But sometimes native English-speaking students of Spanish articulate tapped R as if it were a single tap isolated from a trilled R, pronouncing it with some kind of turbulence. In this recording, Sam pronounces most of his tapped Rs in every phonetic context very well. You can hear this in words like pero, enorme, metros, and acercó. But other times he articulates it with turbulence, pronouncing oscuro like oscuro, aire like aire, and mirada like mirada. Number 3. Unstressed vowels as schwa. In English, it's common to turn unstressed vowels into schwas, and native English speakers have a hard time avoiding this tendency when they speak Spanish, particularly when the unstressed vowel is an a. Sam actually does a really nice job articulating every vowel fully and completely. You can hear him pronouncing unstressed a very clearly in phrases like primera cosa de todas, bastante rara, piedrecitas, and sin más ceremonias. But he does reduce some unstressed vowels in places, pronouncing salía like salía, tenía like tenía, parecían like parecían, and durante like durante. Number 4. Spanish E like long A. Depending on the dialect, the phonetic context, or even the individual speaker from moment to moment, Spanish E can be pronounced as either open E or closed E. Versus E. The tendency for native English speakers is to pronounce closed E as if it were the English long A sound. But English long A is different from closed E, in that long A is a diphthong comprised of E and E. A. In this recording, Sam sometimes pronounces E like closed E and sometimes like open E, and in both of these cases he sounds perfectly natural, but he also occasionally pronounces it like long A. So, for example, he pronounces pequeña like pequeña, cabeza like cabeza, dedo like dedo, and hecha like hecha. Random stuff. And just like everyone else, Sam made some occasional random boo-boos that I don't think constitute any kind of pattern and don't merit an analysis. With this discussion to prepare our ears, let's listen to Sam's recording. As we listen and read along, each time he pronounces something from one of these two categories that could use some improvement, I'll circle it with a colored circle. And when he pronounces something correctly from this category that he sometimes pronounces incorrectly, I'll identify it with a dashed white circle. Alright, here goes.
Fue en este momento cuando ocurrió la primera cosa de todas, la cosa bastante rara que luego dio lugar a las otras cosas mucho más raras que le sucedieron, porque de pronto, justo a sus espaldas, James oyó un movimiento de hojas y al volverse vio a un anciano vestido con un extraño traje de color verde oscuro, que salía de entre los arbustos. Era un hombre de pequeña estatura, pero tenía una enorme cabeza calva y la cara casi oculta tras unas pobladas patillas negras. Se paró a unos metros y se quedó mirando seriamente a James, apoyado en su bastón. Cuando habló, su voz era lenta y chirriante. «Acércate a mí, pequeño», dijo, señalando a James con el dedo. «Ven aquí y te enseñaré algo maravilloso». James estaba demasiado asustado como para moverse. El anciano avanzó cojeando un par de pasos y entonces metió una mano en el bolsillo de la chaqueta y sacó una bolsita de papel blanco. «¿Ves esto?», susurró, balanceando suavemente la bolsita ante los ojos de James. «¿Sabes lo que es esto, hijo? ¿Sabes lo que hay dentro de esta bolsita?». Entonces se acercó otro poco, se inclinó hacia adelante y aproximó tanto su cara a la de James que éste pudo notar su respiración en las mejillas. La respiración del anciano olía a mojo viejo y aserrado, igual que el aire de una bodega subterránea. «Echa una mirada, hijo», dijo, abriendo la bolsa y enseñándosela a James. En su interior, James vio un montón de cositas verdes que parecían piedrecitas o cristales, del tamaño de un grano de arroz. Eran increíblemente hermosas y tenían un extraño brillo, una especie de cualidad luminosa que las hacía destellar y relucir de una forma maravillosa. «Escúchalas», susurró el anciano. «Escucha cómo se mueven». James miró en el interior de la bolsa y pudo comprobar que se notaba un débil murmullo, y también notó que aquellas miles de cositas verdes se movían muy lentamente, subiéndose unas encima de otras como si estuvieran vivas. «Hay más poder y magia en estas cositas de aquí que en todo el resto del mundo», dijo el anciano con voz suave. Pero, ¿qué son?», murmuró James, encontrando por fin su voz. «¿De dónde vienen?». «Ajá», susurró el anciano, «ni te lo imaginas». Se agachó un poco más y acercó la cara a la de James, tanto que su nariz rozaba la frente de éste. De pronto, dio un salto hacia atrás y empezó a blandir su bastón por encima de la cabeza. «Lenguas de cocodrilo», gritó, «1000 largas y viscosas lenguas de cocodrilo, cosidas en el cráneo de una bruja muerta, durante 20 días y 20 noches, con los ojos de un lagarto. Se añaden los dedos de un mono joven, el buche de un cerdo, el pico de un lordo verde, el jugo de un puercoespín y 3 cucharadas de azúcar. Se cuece todo durante otra semana y se deja que la luna haga el resto». Sin más ceremonias, puso la blanca bolsita de papel en la mano de James y dijo: «Ten, sujétala, es para ti». Hace 3 años, un par de amigos me invitaron a rodar en bici de montaña con ellos. Comencé con una vieja bicicleta que ya tenía en el garaje. Monté por 2 temporadas con ellos en las dunas en el desierto en un área local. En un esfuerzo para mejorar mi estado de salud, comencé a andar en mi bicicleta de montaña en un recorrido de 7 millas usando calles cerca de mi casa. Mientras andaba en bici en estos caminos, regularmente me encontraba con un grupo de ciclistas montando en bicicletas de camino. Ellos siempre me preguntaban que cuándo pensaba conseguirme una bicicleta de camino y unirme a ellos. Yo sabía que estos eran ciclistas serios y cada año participaban en una carrera de 200 millas desde Logan, Utah, hasta Jackson, Wyoming. Finalmente decidí que me uniría a ellos, me pondría en forma, participaría en esa carrera de 200 millas y luego me retiraría. No pensé que disfrutaría mucho del ciclismo de camino, pero pensé que participar en esa carrera por lo menos una vez sería un excelente objetivo. Compré una bicicleta y comencé a salir con ellos. Me decepcionó descubrir que mi nivel de condición física no estaba a la altura del de ellos y que sería una tortura estar a la par de ellos. Sin embargo, ellos eran muy amistosos y con gusto me aceptaron como nuevo miembro del grupo. Ellos eran pacientes y me animaban a seguir montando en bici. Los acompañé 3 veces por semana durante todo el verano. Cuando llegó el invierno, montaba en interiores en un rodillo usando una app llamada Zwift. Completé 2.300 millas en un mundo virtual entre noviembre y marzo. Luego, en primavera, volví a salir a andar en bici. Ahora me he vuelto un adicto del ciclismo de camino. Usualmente monto 5 días por semana y sigo un plan de entrenamiento específico para ciclismo de resistencia. Este septiembre pasado fuimos como grupo y completamos la carrera de 200 millas. Sin embargo, no tengo planes de renuncias. He planeado varios eventos y carreras para el siguiente verano y me encuentro entrenando consistentemente para mejorar mi condición física. El ciclismo resultó ser muy bueno para mi salud mental y física y me ha brindado un escape para mi naturaleza competitiva. Y lo mejor de todo, disfruto estas relaciones de amistad que han surgido entre mí y los otros ciclistas, ya que hemos pedaleado cientos de horas juntos.
Alright, so what can Sam do to improve his pronunciation? Well, Sam is already reading out loud for 20 minutes a day, which is excellent practice. My recommendation to him is that he incorporate the following suggestions into his daily reading, focusing on only one sound each week. I'll bet that if he did that, he could completely correct all the sounds I'm about to discuss in less than 3 months. Okay, so here are my suggestions. 1. Learn to pronounce Spanish L higher and brighter. I have a video on this topic in my Core Phonetics and Phonology playlist that I recommend Sam watch. Pronouncing Spanish L correctly has the additional benefit of making it easier to pronounce other Spanish sounds when they're adjacent to L. 2. Learn to pronounce the PT and K phonemes less explosively and without an accompanying aspiration, and pronounce T with the tip of the tongue on the back of the upper front teeth near the incisal edge. I have a video on PT and K in my Core Phonetics and Phonology playlist. I recommend that Sam spend 1 week on each of these sounds rather than working on them all at the same time. 3. Become consistent in pronouncing B, D, and G as soft approximants and fricatives. Sam does pronounce each of these sounds correctly at least sometimes in this recording, especially D, which he pronounced very nicely about half the time. So he doesn't need to learn how to pronounce them, he just needs to apply the correct pronunciation consistently. Again, I recommend that he dedicate 1 week of his daily out-loud reading practice to each of these sounds. 4. Consistently pronounce tapped R as a tap. Again, Sam already pronounces tapped R correctly most of the time. All he needs to do is become more consistent with tapped R. I recommend that he pay attention to the tapped R's that I've identified in this video, figure out why the less than ideal pronunciations are less than ideal, and practice the correct version. I have a whole video on this topic too. 5. Practice pronouncing all unstressed vowels fully and completely with no reduction. Sam tends to pronounce unstressed A as a schwa immediately following stressed I in words like salía and tenía. This is a tendency I've observed in several native English speakers who speak very high-level Spanish, and in one who has otherwise perfect pronunciation. I'm sure that if Sam is aware that he does this and dedicates some of his practice time to it, he can improve it. 6. Practice pronouncing all E's like open E in English words like bed and test, and never pronouncing them like English long A. Now, the pronunciation of E in Spanish is variable, and attempts to categorize exactly when natives pronounce open E and when they pronounce closed E have failed, because as I mentioned earlier, it not only depends on phonetic context, but varies from dialect to dialect, speaker to speaker, and even moment to moment in the same speaker. I recommend for students that they assume that Spanish has only one E, and that it's the open E. I believe that certain phonetic contexts will naturally cause students to modify that pronunciation slightly without them even realizing it, and they'll end up pronouncing E within a range that sounds natural to Spanish ears. I believe that pronouncing E like this is the best way to avoid overdoing it and pronouncing it like long A. As I said, I believe that if Sam dedicated 1 week of the daily reading he's already doing to each of these sounds, he could sort them out in less than 3 months. Alright, so where would I rank Sam on the Spanish pronunciation scale? Well, he definitely articulates more than some Spanish sounds correctly, so this description is not generous enough. But it cannot be said that he usually applies correct Spanish phonology, so he's not here yet. I think this description applies very well to Sam's pronunciation in this recording. Articulates most basic Spanish sounds accurately, beginning to apply correct Spanish phonology. And this description aligns well with my impression of how well an unprepared native listener would perceive him. His pronunciation is easy to understand, but he has a foreign accent. So for this recording, I'd give Sam a rating of 5. I find Sam's situation where he spoke his second language well decades ago and is now trying to resurrect it very interesting. I don't recall ever seeing anything like it before. I have a strong suspicion that he's going to make big improvement and reach his personal goals within a few months. Alright, if you've enjoyed this video or learned something from it, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content.